Hello Samurais, I just finished The Art of a Game Design by Jesse Skill, and it is very awesome book. Like as a beginner game designer, it was like a bible for me. Like why it's not in depth about the certain specific stuff like balancing or production pipeline and things like that, but it is quite an overall understanding that what is happening during the game designing process. For example, when the idea has come out, how does the idea put it together to make a prototype, to convince, to pitch the publisher or VC, and a lot of things that happen during the process of game designing, like iteration, looping around the single idea and then sketching out the ideas. And it is very good book. And today I want to talk about what I learned from this book. Point number one is quite an obvious about this book. First, this book is not in depth of game design, but it is more of like an overall understanding of a game designing process. So, for example, the book is started by an author says that you should consider yourself a game designer before even you became one. So, that is one of the part. They say that you should understand that you are a designer, then you have creativity, then there is the idea, like idea happen in a team, idea get prototyped, and a lot of other stuff. Then it was the author was talking about game balancing, then it was business, then it was a pitch, then it was how does it sell, is does it free and live service, or is it one shot like a story or a single player game, what the game is about, the theme, the story, the world building, the game, the level building. Why does some enemies are over there and not the other way around? And a lot of other stuff. So, so the books revolves around telling you what is the overall understanding of game design process. It is not in depth of how you can balance the certain part of a game. Like if you are making a shooting game, then what should be a damage number of certain bullets and certain other stuff, like what should be a headshot. It is not about that. It is about okay, you are coming into a balancing state. So what should you be doing? What should you be doing in this state? You are going through mechanics. You are playing certain times and figure out what you feel like, whether it's difficult or easy or hard. What is it? You and then you balance it out like and then there was a talking about storytelling. Like, is it a character driven story where you linearly put out the um, mission flow and everything? Or is it something like Elden Ring, like where you are nobody and you decide what you are doing, not other things? Then there was a talking about business aspect of a game where author says that you should consider whether the game is going to be marketable or not. It is if it's not, it is likely that your game going to be fall, the game going to be fail, and so on. And pretty much overall understanding of what the game is all about. There was about world building, like how you can use space and elements and geometry to evoke certain emotions. They was talking about sound design, like to how can you make a simple stage into a very intense moment. Just use certain soundtracks to make it even more better. The best example of this is coming from Elden Ring. Uh, the fight with Melania, everyone says that she is the most hard boss, but in a one sense, when I found out that she's not like the hardest boss in the game, not even probably close to it. The one thing makes her the most ridiculously unfair. It's her water flow dance. It was the only one reason she is unbeatable. And what actually makes her incredibly hard is the way the sound design work during that state, because you hear the very intense sound while you fight the boss, and that may provoke and certain emotion into you to uh, with and you feel that every move she do becomes more aggressive, but in reality she is not that aggressive at all, but the sound makes you feel that way. Then there is a talk about how you can tell the story, whether it's a linear or non-linear story, how you can make a level even more interesting by just adding certain level of understanding. Again, let's go for another example. When you come into a Limgrave, sorry, your couple of things you saw on a first side, on a first resting side. There is a one character named as a where who, like, according to story, he taunting you for being a medialness. Then the first thing you saw there is a tree sentinel, the boss, riding a horse basically, and pretty much game sets the point that this guy is to be killed. And when you try it out, you get fucked up because you are a first level person and you have no experience of souls. Like, you realize that this game is going to be the very hardest. But honestly, the game just making a fun of you or making and pranking you with. Yeah, and then the second thing you saw is the biggest is quite a distance castle, Stormville Castle, and then that clears out that okay, you have to do something about the castle. And then the last thing, the entire center of the story is the oak tree, the yellowish tree, the biggest tree in a game. You saw it from almost all the locations from the um, game, and that makes a very interesting level. That's what a lot of things talk. That's what the author talk about. Make an interesting point about games and lot. And so I can talk about more about what the author talks about, but the mainly what I would say is that it's overall the one of the good book to understand how the game design work in its surface level, or at least in the beginning you should be knowing certain stuff. So that would be really a good starting point. The second point is lenses. The game introduced lenses as a concept of a POV, or point of view, that we see we should see as a designer, we should see the game with those lenses. And lenses are just basically questions to ask to our game to get a good ideas and answers to um, keep it with um, one direction. Because like when you start making a game, it is very easy to run into an overscoping and getting a AAA game within just 3 months, and you will realize that oh, now you cannot progress anywhere longer because your game has no goal at all. Since I will talk about in a fourth point, like game is an experience, but let's take an example of how I played Elden Ring. Now, why am I taking an example of Elden Ring? Because I played Elden Ring just recently, and I was surprised by how amazing this game is. Whether it's taking like story levels, attributes, and how balanced the game is, and like it is game for everyone. Like whatever your personality is, okay, just stop it there. Yeah, but I finished the gathering and I was surprised by the design of this game, and that's why I'm taking an example of this. So, what had happened is that when I came into the game, actually, what the first point, as I said as I said earlier, is the boss you see in front of you, riding a horse. Now, why did you see this person? First of all, like, why it is so interesting? Now we see that the entire frame, if you observe the entire frame, you realize that the only thing yellow over there works in a contrast of an entire background, which is a green, is this tree sentinel, except the earth tree. And that attracts people. Why does this thing is different than the environment? And we eventually just trying to do something about this and start a fight. Now, this just a simple thing in a sense, but this make you they as a designer we make a player to do certain stuff as we wanted them to. That's what this book makes us. Um, that's what this book help us to observe these much of details. You started asking that why certain mechanics are just too good, why certain enemies are too hard and not so good, why certain design elements are just insane, like the attribute system from my belief is just a nerdy thing I ever seen or I ever played. In most gaming, it's quite simple to come up with balancing ideas, but in Elden Ring, it's it's different level. Like each weapon has a different level of monstrosity building with it, and like you have a lot of replayability into the game. And since the game is sorry, I'm so sorry. The thing is, you can see a lot of design aspect and question the game to find out why the certain things just works and certain things don't. You realize that you can reason, you can give a reasons about why does this mechanics just help me getting better and why this is so important for this game and why certain things sucks. Yeah, and that is very important when it comes to game design because it makes your brain observe other games, and when you observe other games you get better understanding of what will eventually work out and what you should be not working on it. Now there is a second good example is that this chameleon, mecha chameleon, macho chameleon is, I'm sorry, I don't know pronouncing it right, but the game for artists basically. It is like you hide. Uh, I'm sorry. You hide onto the places and just paint on yourself, and the other people try to find you out in those areas, and you do some sounds to attract their attentions, but they have to find out you. And the better artist you are, the harder they will suffer to find you out. This is a very fresh concept, and honestly, probably I believe it's masterful. I don't know how they come up with the idea, but the thing is, it makes you observe. This reading this book will give you a lot of lenses that you can question back to the games and understand why certain things work and why does it not, why certain things sucks and how we can improve it, and a lot more like this. Third point is all about the game. So like the idea of game and the development cycle. Now the um, games are okay. The third point is all about the game development cycle. So what the book says that each game is unique. So whether you are making game for a video game like for a computers or a console, you are going to follow a certain development cycle. Or whether you are making a game for like board game, for example Ludo or chess or snake and ladders, those things require different sets of development. Then if you are making game for, let's say, arcade game for like arcades, this little small playstations things like game station, um I don't know how to pronounce them, but like sort of machine, like game machines, where you play some games. Like you may be quite familiar with the fighting games, which is pretty like so which is pretty much common in those arcade games, some racing games. And you maybe have experience that you are sitting on a like toy bike, and then you move around, and the bike in front of you in a game also move around. So those sort of mediums, I would say, changes depending on what sort of game or what sort of audience you want to make a game for. So just not idea is as important. Like just not idea is important part of the game development cycle, but it is to whom or how you want your audience to make play a game is really important. And that's what the author talks about in the book. The author really extended out the example of the of the one of the game called these Pirates of the Caribbean, or I don't know what was the name, since it was quite some time since I read this book. But the point is that they talk about extensively the game they created for the Disney park, and which was really quite awesome game, which has cannonballs, cannons, pirate ships, and quite a small storyline or like those things. But the point is that is it is that the game idea is the game idea and audience will actually decide what sort of development cycle you are going through. If you are making like a video game, you don't necessarily need to manufacture certain stuff. But if you are making a board game or some sort of other real life games, you might need a manufacturing contracts in those. While on the video games, you need a platform charges and platform licenses and those sort of stuff. So it's for you, when you are come up with certain ideas, you have to thought about, okay, so I got a one idea, and how does I want it to make it real? What is the audience going to play? But does really you have to think about a lot of this thing when you are trying to design a game? Actually yes, because you just the thing that in a game development or a game designing, it says that the ideas are cheap, execution is everything. It says that. And the thing is that your idea might fascinate you, but it would not everyone. Maybe there is certain audience who would be, but you had to research out these things and actually go through all of these things. So should you, well, the book is honestly very good, and you should go for this. But probably what I would say is that the book, first of all, is very simple. Like they use very simple vocabularies, aside very simple vocabularies, so that anyone who is just joined the game development journey could easily follow. And also it covers overall all the workflows you may go through as a designer. Also it's quite helpful for developers too, since it's give them sort of questioning abilities to question their mechanics and balance them as they like. And that is really a good book. Like for a designer, it's probably the must go book. There are other books like Level Up and the other designer workshop and other things. I'm reading those books, but probably I would say is that just go through this book, and this book will give you um, more or less ability to question your design and come up with good answers. But still, the game development is all about like institution and the concept you want to present and the experience you want player to give. So the rules can be banned anyway. Thank you so much for watching this video, and please subscribe because I'm going to be really big person. Yeah, and I'm going to start someday my game studio in Japan. Yeah, thank you so much.